Sometimes the kindest hands belong to the person the world fears the most. Long after midnight, the DeLuca estate stood wrapped in silence beneath a sky washed silver by the moon, its towering windows reflecting the quiet elegance of one of the most respected private residences overlooking the Hudson River. Every chandelier had been dimmed, every hallway carefully polished, and nearly every member of the household staff had already retired for the evening. Only one figure still moved softly through the enormous mansion, carrying a basket filled with freshly folded linens while struggling to keep her eyes open. Olivia Brooks, the estate's plus-size black maid, had been awake for nearly 20 hours. She had begun her morning before sunrise caring for her elderly grandmother, traveled across the city to begin another demanding shift, and had volunteered to finish several extra responsibilities after another employee unexpectedly became ill. She never complained, never asked anyone to lighten her workload, and never allowed exhaustion to become an excuse for unfinished work. To Olivia, being dependable was not simply part of her job. It was the promise she had made to herself after life taught her that no one else would carry her burdens if she refused to carry them herself. Yet even the strongest hearts eventually reach their limits. As she quietly entered the estate library to organize financial records requested for the following morning, the warm scent of polished oak shelves and old leather books surrounded her like a comforting embrace. Rain tapped gently against the tall windows while a grandfather clock marked each passing second with patient rhythm. Olivia carefully arranged the final stack of ledgers before lowering herself into a chair for what she believed would be only a brief moment of rest. Her hands remained folded across the last open record book, but within seconds overwhelming fatigue finally claimed the battle she had been fighting for weeks. Her breathing slowed, her head rested against the edge of the desk, and she drifted into the deepest sleep she had experienced in months without realizing she had never turned off the small reading lamp. Beside her, nearly an hour later, Vincent DeLuca returned home after an exhausting series of meetings across Manhattan. Although newspapers often described the White Mafia Boss as cold, calculating, and impossible to approach, the people who worked inside his home knew a quieter truth. He demanded excellence because he believed responsibility mattered, but he never confused authority with cruelty. Respect, in his eyes, was never optional. Walking toward his private office, Vincent noticed the soft glow escaping beneath the library door. Assuming someone had forgotten to switch off the light, he entered without making a sound. The sight before him immediately stopped him. Olivia remained asleep beside the desk, one hand still resting protectively across the organized documents she had worked so hard to complete. Dark circles beneath her eyes revealed weeks of relentless exhaustion, and even while sleeping she appeared as though she feared disappointing someone. Vincent stood quietly, understanding that this was not carelessness. This was complete physical and emotional exhaustion. Without waking her, he gently removed the papers from beneath her hand and draped a nearby blanket across her shoulders. She barely stirred. After a thoughtful pause, he carefully lifted her into his arms with calm, steady care, carrying her through the silent hallway toward one of the comfo. Morning sunlight slowly filtered through the elegant curtains of the guest bedroom, filling the quiet space with soft golden light as Olivia Brooks slowly opened her eyes. For several peaceful seconds, she simply stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, unable to understand why the mattress beneath her felt so comfortable or why every aching muscle in her body seemed lighter than it had in weeks. Then confusion quickly became panic. She sat upright, looking around the beautifully furnished room she immediately recognized as one of the private guest suites reserved for important visitors to the DeLuca estate. Her heart began racing. She could not remember how she had arrived there. The last clear memory she possessed was organizing financial records inside the library before sitting down for what she believed would be only a brief moment. Embarrassment rushed through her all at once. She had fallen asleep while working. Olivia climbed out of bed as quickly as she could and noticed her freshly cleaned uniform carefully folded across a nearby chair beside a glass of water and a small breakfast tray that still carried the warmth of freshly prepared tea. Resting neatly beside the tray was a handwritten note containing only one sentence. "Please eat before returning to work." There was no signature, yet something about the calm handwriting made her wonder who had taken the time to think about someone as ordinary as herself. Before she could gather her thoughts, A gentle knock sounded at the door. The estate physician entered with a warm smile, introducing himself before explaining that he had been asked to examine her before she resumed any responsibilities. Olivia apologized repeatedly, insisting she was perfectly fine and deeply sorry for creating inconvenience inside the household. The physician patiently listened before quietly explaining that exhaustion was not a personal failure. After completing a brief examination, he informed her that her body showed unmistakable signs of prolonged fatigue caused by inadequate sleep, constant stress, and physical overwork. He encouraged her to slow down before temporary exhaustion became a serious health concern. Olivia thanked him politely, but inside she struggled to imagine how slowing down could ever be possible while her grandmother depended upon her and household expenses continued growing every month. A short time later, she walked downstairs expecting disappointment from everyone she encountered. Instead, the atmosphere throughout the mansion remained calm. Several employees smiled kindly after seeing she looked healthier, while others simply wished her a pleasant morning before returning to their own responsibilities. Confused by their warmth, Olivia continued toward the dining room, where Vincent DeLuca sat reviewing several documents beside a cup of freshly brewed coffee. The moment he noticed her standing near the entrance, he quietly closed the folder before him and invited her to take a seat. Olivia remained, standing with her hands folded nervously in front of her. She apologized for falling asleep during work, accepted full responsibility for her mistake, and admitted she would understand completely if he decided to dismiss her from the estate. Vincent listened without interrupting until she finished speaking. Then he looked directly into her eyes with calm sincerity and asked one simple question that immediately silenced every fearful thought inside her mind. Who has been taking care of you? Olivia searched for an answer, but discovered only quiet emptiness. She could remember caring for her grandmother, helping her younger brother, supporting neighbors, and spending every waking hour making life easier for everyone around her. Yet she could not remember the last time anyone had sincerely asked about her own well-being. Vincent gently explained that no employee working inside his home should ever believe collapsing from exhaustion was proof of loyalty. True dedication, he said, should never require someone to sacrifice their health or dignity. He informed Olivia that she would spend the remainder of the day resting with full pay and that every responsibility waiting for her had already been reassigned. Before she could protest, he offered one final sentence with the same quiet conviction that had guided every decision he made. A person who spends every day caring for others deserves the chance to be cared for as well. Those words remained with Olivia long after she quietly left the room, because for the first time in many years, she began wondering whether kindness was something she was finally allowed to receive instead of only giving away. The days that followed brought an unfamiliar feeling into Olivia Brooks's life, one she had almost forgotten could exist. She still woke before sunrise to help her elderly grandmother prepare breakfast and organize medications before traveling across the city to the DeLuca estate. But now there were quiet moments when she realized she no longer felt as though every minute of the day was chasing her toward exhaustion. Vincent DeLuca had quietly adjusted the household schedules without ever mentioning her name. Extra responsibilities were divided more fairly among the staff. Mandatory meal breaks were carefully observed, and overtime assignments rotated evenly instead of falling upon the same dependable employees. Most members of the household assumed the estate manager had simply improved efficiency. Only Vincent knew those changes had begun the moment he realized that loyalty should never be rewarded with burnout. Olivia noticed the difference immediately, but she could not understand why it had happened. She simply thanked Margaret Ellis for the thoughtful scheduling, believing the longtime housekeeper deserved the credit. Margaret only smiled kindly and replied that sometimes people finally noticed what had always been standing quietly in front of them. Olivia did not fully understand those words, yet they remained with her throughout the day. Later that afternoon, while organizing fresh linens inside the laundry room, Margaret gently asked whether Olivia would join her for lunch instead of continuing to work through the break. Olivia almost refused out of habit before remembering Vincent's quiet reminder that caring for herself was not selfish. Sitting together over warm soup and fresh bread, Margaret gradually learned more about the woman who had become one of the estate's most dependable employees. Olivia spoke without self-pity as she explained how her parents had passed away several years earlier after a long illness, leaving her responsible for helping raise her younger brother until he finished college while also caring for her grandmother whose health had slowly declined. Every paycheck disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived through rent, groceries, tuition payments, transportation, and medical expenses. She never described those responsibilities as sacrifices because family had always come first in her heart. She simply believed there would be time to care for herself someday, after everyone else no longer needed her. Unknown to either woman, Vincent happened to walk past the open pantry doorway while discussing estate maintenance with the property manager. Their conversation reached him clearly enough that he quietly paused without interrupting. For the first time, he understood the full weight Olivia carried every single day behind her gentle smile. She had never requested special treatment, never asked for financial assistance, and never attempted to earn sympathy by explaining her circumstances. She simply continued giving everything she had until her own strength finally reached its limit. Vincent calmly continued walking after a brief moment, revealing nothing about what he had overheard. Later that evening, while reviewing employee schedules inside his office, he noticed Olivia had accepted nearly every available overtime shift during the previous several months. Without hesitation, he instructed the estate manager to redistribute future overtime equally among the staff and to ensure every employee received proper rest between shifts. No explanation accompanied the decision because Vincent believed genuine kindness never required an audience. The following morning, Olivia discovered her schedule had become noticeably lighter. For the first time in months, she finished breakfast before beginning her responsibilities instead of rushing through another exhausting day on an empty stomach. Standing beside the kitchen window while early sunlight illuminated the gardens beyond the estate, she quietly closed her eyes and breathed deeply. It lasted only a few peaceful moments, yet those moments reminded her what life could feel like when survival was no longer the only goal. She never realized that someone had already begun protecting her future long before she believed she deserved one. As autumn settled gently over the DeLuca estate, the quiet changes Vincent had introduced began reshaping daily life in ways most people barely noticed. Workloads became more balanced, meal breaks were respected, and every member of the household found enough time to complete responsibilities without sacrificing their health. Olivia Brooks appreciated the lighter schedule more than anyone, although she believed the improvements had simply been part of a new management plan. She continued performing every duty with the same humility and dedication that had always defined her, never expecting recognition for work she considered a privilege rather than an obligation. Yet kindness, even when offered quietly, often attracted misunderstanding before it inspired gratitude. Several newer employees gradually noticed that Vincent occasionally asked Olivia whether she had eaten lunch or whether her grandmother was recovering well after medical treatment. His questions were brief, respectful, and no different from the concern he occasionally showed other members of the household. But because very few people had witnessed genuine compassion from someone with his public reputation, simple courtesy quickly transformed into whispered speculation. Olivia remained completely unaware of those conversations during the first several days. She only sensed that something felt different. Friendly conversations suddenly ended when she entered the staff lounge. Smiles became shorter. Comfortable laughter faded into awkward silence. No one treated her with open disrespect, yet she could feel an invisible distance growing between herself and people who had once greeted her warmly every morning. Instead of questioning anyone, Olivia quietly blamed herself. She wondered whether she had unknowingly offended someone or perhaps accepted more kindness than she deserved. Determined not to become a source of discomfort inside the home that had given her stable employment, she worked even harder while remaining as gentle and considerate as ever. Margaret Ellis observed the gradual change with growing concern. After managing the estate for decades, she understood how quickly assumptions could spread when left unanswered. One afternoon, she overheard two younger employees quietly suggesting that Olivia had received lighter responsibilities because the mafia boss favored her personally. Margaret immediately reminded them that fairness did not become unfair simply because someone misunderstood its purpose. The employees apologized politely, but the whispers had already traveled farther than anyone realized. Later that evening, Olivia entered the laundry room carrying freshly pressed linens and noticed the conversation stopped the instant she opened the door. Several employees exchanged uncomfortable glances before returning to work without saying a word. Olivia forced a small smile, placed the folded linens on the shelves, and quietly excused herself. As she walked through the peaceful gardens behind the mansion after finishing her shift, she replayed the moment repeatedly inside her mind until one painful conclusion slowly formed. If Vincent's kindness toward her had unintentionally created division among the staff, then perhaps remaining at the estate would eventually harm the peaceful environment everyone deserved. She cared too deeply about the people around her to become the reason resentment continued growing. Standing beneath a row of maple trees whose golden leaves drifted gently across the stone pathway, Olivia made a difficult decision. She would quietly submit her resignation before the rumors caused greater damage. She would thank Vincent sincerely for every act of compassion he had shown her and leave with gratitude rather than allow his generosity to become a burden upon anyone else. Unaware of the choice she had just made, Vincent stood inside the library overlooking the same garden through tall windows, watching the woman whose quiet strength had already changed more lives than she realized, never imagining that her greatest instinct was still to sacrifice her own happiness so everyone else could remain at peace. The following morning arrived beneath a sky covered with soft gray clouds, and although the DeLuca estate continued moving with its usual quiet precision, Olivia Brooks carried a decision inside her heart that felt heavier than anything she had lifted during months of work. Before beginning her duties, she carefully folded a single sheet of paper and placed it inside a plain envelope. The resignation letter contained no complaints, no accusations, and no explanation beyond sincere gratitude for the opportunity she had been given. She believed leaving quietly would protect the harmony of the household better than remaining where her presence had unknowingly become the center of whispered speculation. Throughout the morning, she completed every responsibility with the same care she had shown since her first day at the estate. Fresh flowers were arranged. Throughout the entrance hall, guest rooms were prepared for the coming weekend, and the library shelves were dusted with patient attention. No one looking at Olivia would have guessed that every familiar task might be the last she ever performed inside the home that had slowly begun to feel like a place of safety. Shortly before noon, Margaret Ellis informed her that Vincent DeLuca had asked to see her in his office whenever she had finished organizing several documents. Olivia quietly thanked her, gently tightened her grip on the envelope, and walked toward the second floor with calm determination. Standing outside the office door, she took one slow breath before knocking softly. Vincent looked up from several business reports and immediately noticed the unusual seriousness in her expression. He invited her inside and quietly closed the folder resting on his desk. Olivia thanked him once again for every kindness he had shown since the night he found her asleep in the library. She spoke with sincere respect, explaining that working at the estate had restored more hope than he could ever imagine. Then she carefully placed the envelope on his desk and admitted that she believed it was time for her to leave. Vincent looked at the envelope without opening it. Instead, he calmly asked one question. Is this truly your decision, or is it someone else's opinion that has convinced you to make it? Olivia lowered her eyes before honestly admitting that recent weeks had made her realize how easily kindness could be misunderstood. She explained that several employees had become uncomfortable because they believed she received special treatment, and she never wanted his generosity to create division inside a household built upon respect. She insisted that leaving would be the simplest solution for everyone involved. Vincent remained silent for several thoughtful moments before slowly standing and walking toward the large window overlooking the autumn gardens. Without turning around, he spoke with the same quiet certainty that had always guided his decisions. If you choose to leave because your heart tells you your journey belongs somewhere else, I will respect that choice without hesitation. But if you choose to leave because someone has made you question your own worth, then I cannot accept this letter. Olivia felt tears quietly gather in her eyes. Vincent finally turned to face her and continued with calm sincerity. No decent person should ever feel obligated to disappear simply because others misunderstood compassion. Your dignity does not become smaller because someone else refuses to see it. Olivia looked at the unopened envelope resting untouched upon the desk and realized that for the first time in her life, someone was not asking her to stay because of the work she completed or the responsibilities she carried. He was asking her to stay because he believed she deserved to stand exactly where she was without apologizing for receiving simple human kindness. At that quiet moment, the resignation letter no longer felt like an escape. It felt like a burden she no longer needed to carry. The morning after Olivia Brooks quietly withdrew her resignation, an unusual calm settled over the DeLuca estate. The decision she had almost made remained known only to her and Vincent DeLuca. Yet he understood that allowing silent misunderstandings to continue would eventually harm every person working beneath his roof. Respect could not remain an unspoken expectation. It had to become a shared principle. Shortly after breakfast, Margaret Ellis politely informed every employee that the Mafia boss wished to gather the entire household staff in the main drawing room before the day's responsibilities began. No explanation accompanied the request, leaving many people quietly wondering whether an important announcement was about to be made. Olivia stood near the back of the room, hoping the meeting had nothing to do with her. She preferred remaining unnoticed rather than becoming the center of attention once again. When everyone had arrived, Vincent stepped forward with the same composed confidence that had earned the respect of everyone who truly knew him. His voice remained calm, never demanding silence because silence arrived naturally the moment he began speaking. He first thanked every member of the household for the professionalism and dedication they demonstrated every day. He reminded them that the estate had earned its reputation not through wealth or influence, but through the integrity of the people who cared for it. Several employees nodded with quiet pride, believing the gathering would end with routine updates. Instead, Vincent paused before continuing. He explained that during recent weeks, he had become aware of conversations built upon assumptions rather than truth. No names were mentioned. No employee was singled out. He refused to embarrass anyone because humiliation had never taught respect. He simply stated that when kindness shown to one person became a reason for another person to spread doubt or suspicion, the entire household lost something far more valuable than trust. The room fell completely silent. Several employees lowered their eyes as they realized exactly what he meant. Vincent calmly continued by explaining that recent changes to work schedules had been introduced for every member of the staff because exhaustion should never become the price of loyalty. Fair treatment was not a reward. It was a responsibility. He slowly looked across the room before speaking the words that remained with everyone long after the meeting ended. Respect is not optional inside this home. Every person who works here deserves dignity before they earn praise, before they receive promotion, and before anyone forms an opinion about them. His words carried no anger, only quiet conviction. He reminded everyone that a person's appearance, background, financial situation, or personal struggles could never determine their value. Character was revealed through kindness, honesty, and the way people treated one another when no one else was watching. After several long moments of thoughtful silence, one of the younger employees stepped forward with visible regret and admitted that careless speculation had allowed simple kindness to become something it had never been. Another employee quietly apologized for believing rumors without seeking the truth. Their honesty encouraged others to reflect upon their own assumptions. Olivia remained overwhelmed by what she witnessed. She had never expected public apologies or dramatic gestures. She had only wished for peace. When the meeting concluded, several co-workers approached her with genuine warmth, offering sincere apologies and welcoming smiles that carried none of the awkwardness she had felt during previous weeks. Later that afternoon, Olivia found Vincent standing alone beside the library window overlooking the autumn gardens where falling leaves drifted peacefully across the stone paths. She thanked him softly for protecting her dignity when she had been prepared to surrender it herself. Vincent gently shook his head before answering with quiet sincerity. He told her he had not protected one employee. He had protected the kind of home he wanted every decent person to feel proud walking into each morning. As Olivia looked across the peaceful gardens, she realized that true leadership was never measured by how many people feared someone's authority. It was measured by how safe people felt bringing their whole hearts into that person's presence. Life inside the DeLuca estate gradually settled into a peaceful rhythm once again. But something far more meaningful had changed than work schedules or daily routines. Trust had quietly returned. Employees who once exchanged uncertain glances now greeted one another with genuine warmth, and the invisible walls created by misunderstanding slowly disappeared. Olivia Brooks noticed the difference every morning as she walked through the bright marble hallways. Smiles no longer faded when she entered a room, conversations no longer stopped at her arrival, and simple acts of teamwork became part of everyday life again. She accepted every apology with sincere grace because she had never wished for anyone to feel ashamed. She only hoped they would learn to see one another with greater compassion. Vincent DeLuca watched those quiet transformations without seeking recognition. To him, respect only carried real meaning when people chose it willingly rather than following instructions out of obligation. Several weeks later, preparations began for the DeLuca Foundation's annual Winter Community Outreach Program, one of the largest charitable projects organized by the family each year. Hundreds of volunteers would prepare food packages, winter clothing, educational supplies, and holiday gifts for families across New York. During one planning meeting, Margaret Ellis surprised everyone by recommending Olivia to coordinate the volunteer teams. The room became unusually quiet because although everyone respected Olivia, the responsibility was larger than anything she had ever managed before. Olivia herself immediately shook her head with humble uncertainty, insisting there were many people more qualified than she could ever be. Before anyone else could respond, Vincent calmly looked toward her and spoke with quiet confidence. He explained that leadership was never determined by titles, wealth, or position. True leaders made other people feel valued simply by believing in them. He reminded everyone that volunteers naturally trusted Olivia because she listened before speaking, encouraged instead of criticizing, and quietly solved problems without asking for praise. Those qualities, he said, could not be taught through management books because they were reflections of character. Hearing those words, Olivia slowly realized that Vincent was not asking her to become someone different. He was asking her to believe in the person she had already spent years becoming. She accepted the responsibility with quiet gratitude. Over the following weeks, the outreach program became an inspiring example of teamwork. Olivia organized schedules, welcomed every volunteer personally, remembered names after meeting people only once, and treated every individual with equal patience regardless of age or experience. Whenever unexpected challenges appeared, she remained calm, helping others find solutions together rather than placing blame. Volunteers who had arrived feeling nervous quickly found themselves smiling, because Olivia created an atmosphere where mistakes became opportunities to learn instead of reasons for embarrassment. Vincent occasionally visited the preparation center after finishing business meetings, never interrupting Olivia's work or taking control of her decisions. Instead, he quietly carried donation boxes, arranged tables, and thanked volunteers individually before leaving again. Watching him serve alongside everyone else reminded Olivia that genuine strength rarely announced itself. It simply appeared whenever people needed it most. One snowy evening, after the final volunteers had gone home, Olivia stepped outside the community warehouse to enjoy a moment of peaceful silence beneath the falling snow. Vincent joined her carrying 2 cups of warm tea. Together, they stood overlooking the quiet city lights without feeling the need to fill every moment with conversation. After several peaceful minutes, Olivia softly admitted that she had finally stopped measuring her worth by how exhausted she became at the end of each day. Vincent smiled gently before replying that people who spent their lives lifting others deserved someone willing to remind them they did not have to carry every burden alone. As snowflakes settled quietly around them, both understood that what had begun with one unexpected act of kindness had slowly become something neither of them wished to imagine living without. The Winter Outreach Program became one of the most successful community efforts the DeLuca Foundation had ever organized. Hundreds of families received warm meals, winter coats, school supplies, and practical support during the coldest months of the year, yet the greatest difference could not be measured by numbers alone. Every visitor who entered the community center felt welcomed with genuine respect, and before long people throughout the neighborhood began describing it as a place where dignity mattered just as much as assistance. Olivia Brooks never sought recognition for any of it. She simply greeted each person with the same kindness she had once wished someone would show her. Elderly neighbors found a patient listener, young parents discovered encouragement during difficult seasons, and children quickly learned that the smiling woman at the front desk remembered every name after meeting them only once. The volunteers admired her because she never considered herself above any task. She arranged chairs before meetings, carried donation boxes beside everyone else, and stayed late whenever another family needed help. Several months later, members of the DeLuca Foundation gathered to discuss expanding the project into a permanent neighborhood resource center that would remain open throughout the year. As ideas filled the conference room, Vincent DeLuca quietly listened before making a simple recommendation that immediately surprised everyone present. He proposed that Olivia become the full-time coordinator responsible for leading the new center. Several board members exchanged thoughtful glances, not because they questioned her character, but because the position carried significant responsibility. Vincent calmly explained that leadership built upon compassion created stronger communities than leadership built upon titles alone. Every report submitted during the outreach program demonstrated that volunteers worked more confidently, families returned more often, and local organizations partnered more willingly whenever Olivia guided the effort. Those results reflected trust, and trust could never be purchased. When Margaret Ellis informed Olivia about the decision later that afternoon, she stood speechless for several long moments. She quietly admitted that she had spent most of her life believing her purpose was simply to work hard enough to avoid becoming a burden to anyone else. Margaret smiled warmly before reminding her that some people were meant to carry responsibilities, while others were meant to inspire hope. Olivia had quietly become both. She accepted the position with humble gratitude, promising to protect every visitor's dignity exactly as others had protected hers. During the months that followed, the Neighborhood Resource Center flourished beyond anyone's expectations. Local schools partnered with the program, retired teachers volunteered to tutor children after class, healthcare organizations organized wellness events, and countless families discovered opportunities that changed the direction of their lives. Vincent continued visiting regularly, never arriving with unnecessary attention or ceremony. He preferred carrying supplies through the front entrance beside volunteers rather than standing apart from them. One quiet evening after the center had closed, Olivia and Vincent remained inside organizing books for the children's reading corner while soft spring rain tapped gently against the windows. Olivia paused for a moment, looking across the warm room filled with colorful shelves, donated toys, and handwritten thank you cards covering one wall. She softly admitted that there had once been a time when she believed her future would never extend beyond surviving one exhausting day after another. Now she woke every morning excited to help other people believe in tomorrow. Vincent smiled with quiet admiration before telling her that the greatest leaders rarely realized how many lives they changed because they remained too focused on serving others instead of counting their own accomplishments. Olivia met his eyes with a peaceful smile, understanding that somewhere between one unexpected act of kindness and countless ordinary days shared with mutual respect, two hearts had quietly discovered that healing became even more meaningful when it was experienced together. 1 year later, the first warm days of spring returned to the DeLuca estate, carrying with them blooming gardens, gentle sunlight, and a quiet sense that life had completed a journey neither Vincent DeLuca nor Olivia Brooks could have imagined on the night everything began. The Neighborhood Resource Center had grown into a place known throughout the city not only for helping families in need, but for reminding every visitor that dignity should never depend upon wealth, appearance, or circumstance. Children who had once arrived too shy to speak now laughed together in the reading room. Elderly neighbors found companionship over shared meals. Young adults discovered scholarships, job opportunities, and mentors who believed in their potential. Olivia moved through the center with the same warm smile that had first earned the trust of strangers, greeting each person by name whenever she could. Although many people called her the heart of the center, she quietly insisted that kindness only multiplied because so many people chose to share it together. Vincent continued supporting every program without seeking attention. He attended planning meetings, approved funding for new educational initiatives, and personally thanked volunteers whenever schedules allowed. Yet everyone who truly knew him understood that the greatest investment he had ever made could never be measured in financial reports. It had begun the night he chose compassion instead of convenience. One quiet afternoon after the center closed, Olivia invited Vincent to walk with her through the peaceful gardens surrounding the estate. The pathways were lined with fresh flowers, and birdsong drifted gently through the warm afternoon air. As they approached the library entrance, both instinctively slowed their steps. Olivia smiled softly before opening the familiar wooden door. Everything inside remained beautifully unchanged. Sunlight rested across the polished shelves. The old grandfather clock continued marking time with steady rhythm, and the same reading desk still stood beside the tall window where exhaustion had once overcome her. Olivia quietly placed her fingertips against the edge of the desk and allowed herself a gentle laugh. She admitted that for a long time she had been embarrassed by the memory of falling asleep while working because she believed it had revealed weakness. Vincent looked around the peaceful room before answering with quiet honesty. He told her that night had revealed something entirely different. It had shown him how easily good people could disappear beneath responsibilities no one else ever noticed. Olivia turned toward him with grateful eyes. She explained that before coming to the estate, she believed love was something people earned only after proving they never needed help. Now she understood that real love, whether between family, friends, or two people slowly building a future together, always began with allowing someone to care when life became too heavy to carry alone. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The peaceful silence felt complete exactly as it was. Then Olivia gently reached forward and took Vincent's hand within both of hers. This time, there was no exhaustion clouding her thoughts, no unconscious instinct searching for comfort in the darkness. She knew exactly what she was doing. Looking into his eyes, with quiet confidence, she smiled and said that the first time she held his hand, she had not known who had been standing beside her. The second time, she understood completely why she never wanted to let go. Vincent smiled with the warmth that only a few people had ever been fortunate enough to witness, gently returning her hand without a single unnecessary word. Beyond the library windows, the gardens shimmered beneath the afternoon sun while new blossoms opened across the estate, reminding anyone willing to notice that the strongest relationships are rarely built through grand promises. They grow through countless quiet moments of respect, patience, compassion, and trust. And on that peaceful spring afternoon, the woman who once believed she had to carry the world alone finally understood that the greatest gift another person can offer is not rescue, but the simple promise that from this day forward, no burden will ever have to be carried alone again.